Well, hello to Al. We're going to talk a little bit today about how to use the imperial ruler. So we're going to measure to 1/16. Back in 1L, you looked at measuring up to 1/8. Now we're going to go the step further and go to 16ths. So here's our imperial ruler right here. And I'm just going to talk about how it's divided up. So this is divided up into inches. Each one of these really long pieces here, let's get a different color. One of these really long pieces is a full inch. So from this red line to this red line that I've just drawn on here is 1 inch. Now, instead of dividing up everything into tens like the metric system does, the imperial system starts splitting stuff in half. So we take this inch and then we split it in half, and the next longest bar marks it in half. So that is 1/2 there. Then we're going to take the half and we're going to split it up in half. And when you split a half in half, you get a quarter. Then when you split a quarter in half, which we will here, we'll split the quarter in half, we get an eighth. And finally, when we split an eighth in half, down in here, let's take the blue one again, put that in on there. When you split an eighth in half, you get 1/16. So you just keep splitting them in half and half and half. Now, when you're taking a look at these things, this one, let's see the quarters. This is 1/4. Then the half actually counts as a quarter as well, because these are all the same length in here. And so the half counts as 2/4. And we found that out when we worked with fractions. 2/4 is actually the same as a half. So that's why it counts as quarters. And then this over here would be 3/4. Now you're going to do that the same with eighths and with 16ths. Except that when you land on something that is a long bar, you want to use what its name is. Like this bar here, that's the quarter length that we looked at before. So you don't want to call this, in this case, you don't want to call it by its 16ths name or its eighths name. You would never call a half 2/4. You would always call it a half because it lands on the big bar. But if you're counting quarters, you have to count it over. So you have to go 1, 2, 3/4 instead of skipping that bar entirely and just going 1, 2/4. No, you have to count that when you count over. But if you land on a long bar, you're not going to call it by a smaller bar's name. So let's take a look at a few questions that we're going to measure. So we've got these bars, and you're going to do a worksheet like this too. We want to see where this thing stops. So the bar stops right here. Now, the first thing we have to figure out is how long this bar is. Is it a half? Is it an eighth? What is it? Well, if we take a close look, it's the second or the third longest bar. So here's the longest, 1, 2, 3. So remember, this is an inch, a half inch, a quarter inch. So that's a quarter inch. So we know it has a denominator of 4. Now if we take a look, it's only one of those jumps away from 7. So it's actually just 1/4. And since it's right after the 7, that's our whole. So it's 7 inches and a quarter. So 7 1/4 inches. Now let's take a look at the next one here. Where does it land? Well, it lands on, it's not the smallest bar, so it's not 16ths. It's the next smallest bar, which means that it must be eighths. Now we got to figure out how many eighths it is past 11. Here's the 11, so we know that that's our whole, and we have to figure out how many eighths it is. Now the eighths are these, the second longest bars, so we're going to count them. There's 1. Now we have to count this one, even though it's a little bit longer too. You got to count. You got to go the same space, so we're jumping over. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 eighths. So it's 1 7/8. And the last one we're going to look at, we got to see where it ends. And it ends on, well, it ends on one of the little ones. It ends on the 16ths. And it's right past the 2, so that's our whole number. And it is only one of those little jumps past the 2. So that's 2 1/16 of an inch. So now you're going to have a worksheet where you complete a whole bunch of these kind of things. And then we're going to actually get you to grab a ruler and start measuring some stuff around the classroom. So happy mathing!